Hi, I am Vitold, and this one about Ducati Multistrada V4 is going to be cold to the bone. And if you don't have the nerves, do not proceed, as parental guidance is required here. Also, if you are looking for a reason to get the Ducati Multistrada V4 or just to justify your choice to your wife, leave this video alone and head to my other one, 7 reasons to buy the Multistrada. However, if it's about the wife, the last point in that video may not actually apply and actually make things worse for you. Anyway, if you want to see in a fully raw version what you may potentially not like about the Ducati Multistrada V4 and you want to know that upfront to be able to weigh the pros and cons, then stay, as this will be very helpful. Starting off with a strong point that's hard to understand for me. That is getting rid of the V2 engine, which in turn means that now the exhaust sound is far from being as cool as before. Especially considering aftermarket exhausts, which could extract that unreal experience out of those awesome Ducati's V-twins. I personally loved that, and it used to be in Ducati's DNA, which is now gone. I do hear the reasons of more smoothness now with 4 cylinders and so on, but this argument has led to one of the viewers shooting one of the most vicious and cruel comments about Ducati that I have ever seen, and actually inspired the point number 6 in this video, and it may sum up the experience on this new Ducati Multistrada V4. Just wait for that bomb to be dropped. Props to the author, as it makes more and more sense the more I think about it. Ditching the V2 is one of the reasons for that point as well. In the second point, since sound is not something that we all care about, I do, and so I took the liberty of putting it as the first. But the second point is being quite controversial every time that's being brought up, and which is that Ducati refuses to install a drive shaft, but instead sticks to a cheap chain drive. And I do get that maybe it's lighter, maybe it's easier, maybe it does not lose as much power at the wheel, maybe it's cheaper, which it is, but I don't accept any of those, since advantages of having a drive shaft in the motorcycles in this category are so overwhelming, in my opinion, in comparison to those kind of silly arguments. First of all, there are motorcycles with drive shafts with such power. Just take a look at the good old BMW 1300S or R, with even more power than Multistrada's 170 horsepower, because those have 175 horsepower, or at the current BMW K1600 GT or GTL or any other variation with over 1600 cc of displacement, 160 horsepower, and now over 180 newton meters. That's crazy in a motorcycle. Both are also battery smooth, transferring all those sick numbers through a drive shaft. So now what are the advantages of the drive shaft that Ducati is now missing on? And there are quite a few indeed. And the first one is just peace of mind, as you don't have to do anything with the drive shaft, as it's basically maintenance free. The second is very much connected with that, and it's about the comfort at the same time. So you do not have to stop every few 100 kilometers to spray the chain. You don't have to buy and carry a can with a lubricant with yourself on every longer trip, and there is no mess in the rear part of the bike that otherwise in a Multistrada and every other motorcycle with a chain is covered with sticky and hard, very hard to remove crap. You may forget about any of that with a drive shaft, and that is a luxury that's missing here, even though for so many people, this has often been one of the selling points for motorcycles in this category. It certainly would influence my decision, and ignoring this for years now in a motorcycle that successfully aspires to be a well-rounded tourer, it may even seem ignorant, maybe until you see the next point on the list here, and then one more later. And that is that Multistrada does not feel that well made still. Now this is up to some point subjective, but up to some point it's not. And I've got a proof without even looking for one, and I'll show you that. But let's first take a look at the switches on the handlebar that look super cheap and just like in most Japanese motorcycles from the last 10 years. They're kind of shiny, kind of not shiny, and every single one is in a totally different shape than others. Some may not pay attention to it, some may not agree with this, but after seeing and touching BMW switches, for example, you may think that this is what a benchmark should be in the class. Now take a look at this condom stretched over the start button, come on! Or say you want to use this nice little compartment that Ducati gives us on the fuel tank to put there our newest, fanciest iPhone for €1,500. Sounds like a great idea to store a phone, for example, right? Some charging and so on. Actually very, very cool and fancy. Until you realize that it doesn't work. As if you open it, you need a hammer to close it. And imagine opening and closing it every day for a year. Would you put anything of value into that? Here's also my proof with a random video on a channel called Riders Motorcycles. Hopefully they don't mind me showing this to you. The guy presents the new pretty V4 with an Akrapovic exhaust, and look what happens with the cover. He can't close it properly, just as I said. And it's not that he didn't try, it just wasn't supposed to work from the beginning. Legends of any Ducati's reliability may be true, and actually they are in line with my own experiences, even with the dealers' motorcycles that should have been in the top condition, but a few times in my life over the last 10 years, even in those dealers' motorcycles, things would not be working. And to be fair, that's not yet known in the long run for the V4, except for this cover. So there are basically no other reasons to believe that this would be in place. But there are also no other reasons to believe that it might change. And to hell with not separating this point from the feeling of not being that very well made. I don't want to end up with a list of 20 things that may be considered not the greatest in a Multistrada, because it's a nice and enjoyable motorcycle. But let's move to the next one, as this one was a surprise that caught me totally off guard. And this is because very early on, after setting off on the V4S that I got, I felt it was handling worse than the two previous generations, the 1260 and the 1200 after the facelift. The 1200 before the facelift was the worst handling motorcycle on earth, so it's definitely excluded here. This new V4 did not impress me with its agility / being nimble, especially at low speeds. And don't get me wrong, it's not bad. It doesn't fight with you, for example, like the first 1200, and it's fairly stable and consistent in its reactions. But I do feel that the previous generations were somehow feeling lighter and more willing to cooperate with the rider. Because what's the point of the new model if it does things worse than the outgoing model? Now the fifth point that should be rather objective. You might think that 4 cylinders help this Multistrada stay smooth. And you would be right, as they do, but only in the second half of the RPM range. As below 4000 RPM, the bike still chokes and barks at you just like most V2 engines would. And it doesn't like that. And it lacks the punch in that area as well, despite its power. So if you ride below 100 kilometers and somewhere in that lower range and you open the throttle, it will start shaking and not much would be happening really. And that's not a surprise, but what is strange is that riding it aggressively, I felt on the other hand that the gears were too short. And I would expect the V4 to rev or to keep revving higher and higher and keep just going. But instead it would cut fuel and create a sudden slowdown, reminding me in this way to change a gear. And it's especially challenging as in one of the basic riding settings, the bike keeps lifting its front wheel when accelerating with full power, which is resulting in rider holding the handlebar harder instead of thinking about changing gears. And I was thinking about it until I came to a conclusion that the first few gears must be too short for the amount of power that's there, while the higher gears may be too long on the other hand, and they can't cope when the engine is at lower revs. There's something, I think, weird about the gearing. It's something that didn't suit me. Just go ahead, try. If you find it all good, then it's great. Now the point number 6, coming straight from hell, and the one that we've been waiting for. Some time ago, under my full review of the Multistrada V4, right after riding it, I saw a comment saying that, according to that person, the new Multistrada V4 is like a big scooter. And I thought, how cruel is that? Obviously, there's no scooter that quick. And I was trying to reason with that comment in my head. And I almost responded to that terrible offense with another offense of my own. Just kidding. And actually, you will see. So right after this, I started thinking that indeed, aside from performance, this bike actually feels like a big scooter. It's very smooth at higher RPM. It's extremely quiet when riding normally. So if you are not okay with that bland feeling, you might take a look at the BMW S1000XR or a KTM or even a GS. And the worst, or perhaps the hardest part, is that I don't really know why it does resemble that feeling, and I quietly just expect its looks to contribute to that, and that smoothness and that quietness, all that together. But the looks may play a part in that, perhaps. Now let's get to the not so lucky but short reason number 7. It's that Multistrada V4 gets annoyingly hot on the left side of the engine, to the point that it's uncomfortable to your left leg. And I've read comments saying that some people ride this Multistrada V4 in hot places and they don't feel that. And then some others saying that indeed it gets hot and Ducati should resolve the issue. I can tell you with all certainty that if you ride it like me, so not that soft, it will get hot and you will realize that. It happened pretty quickly, actually. Maybe because I'm not living in a super hot place, so I'm not used to burning my skin every day. But I know from my experience that in motorcycles that don't get enough cooling, this can grow to a large problem. And that's why I have put it into a separate point. And on top of that, we know that Ducati most likely was aware of that, as they have installed a 2 rear cylinders deactivation system to prevent the bike from getting even hotter at traffic stops, for example. And you won't feel that system working, and it doesn't impact the bike's performance. And well, maybe they just forgot to actually make it work. And we will find somewhere 2 cables that aren't connected together. Who knows? Now, an 8th reason that had to be coming, as this is a very expensive motorcycle. And I'm not going to be telling you guys if it's worth your money or not, as that's entirely your call. It definitely may be, but it also does not necessarily have to be worth it. Sometimes some things are not about strictly calculated numbers, but be aware that this is likely the most expensive motorcycle in this class. And even Harley Davidson will ask for less for their Pan America. And that's actually justified, as it's currently the ugliest human creation on earth. But let's put that aside. 9th point, and the last one at the same time, is somehow connected with the previous one, but it's so significant that it deserved to get its own spot here. And it's that Ducati will charge you for accessories and parts like no other manufacturer. If you've got the money to spend and you don't care, as you just love the bike, just forget about those 2 points. A motorcycle is supposed to deliver as much joy as possible, and Ducati Multistrada V4 certainly can be that kind of a motorcycle, if you can agree for some of those drawbacks, or you simply don't care about them as well. And then this means that it's a bike exactly for you, and I hope that most of you guys will end up with such a feeling. Especially if you already have the Multistrada V4. If you don't, then head also to my other video with 7 reasons why getting this Multistrada could work great for you. Now, thank you for watching. I hope you got a broader point of view now. Take care and see you in the next video. Bye.